Greetings fellow gamers, I'm the Soulsborne Seeker and today I'll be reviewing Mandragora, Whispers of the Witch Tree, an action-packed Souls-like metroidvania game developed by Primal Game Studio and released on the 17th of April 2025 for PC, PS5 and the Xbox Series X and Series S, with a Nintendo Switch release expected later in the year. Mandragora, Whispers of the Witch Tree transpires in the grimdark world of Faelduum, a realm plagued by legions of monstrous creatures of both the human and supernatural kind. You are an inquisitor of the Crimson City, the last veritable stronghold against the advancing darkness, as well as the only cradle of humanity where the spark of hope remains alive as a result of its ruler's eminence, namely the King Priest. During a demonstration of authority gone wrong, you end up imbued with the power of a dying witch and, following an uneasy conversation with your divine leader, you are sent on a quest to apprehend the witch's sister, a journey that will take you across the battered land of Faelduum and ever closer to the truth about what actually led to its downfall. While the narrative doesn't tread any new ground, it does a fantastic job of fleshing out the world's deep lore in nostalgically familiar ways that make every nook and cranny of it feel meaningful. A world populated by incredibly interesting and eccentric characters that are fully voiced with masterful competence and rendered in beautifully painterly strokes, both when it comes to their portrait avatars as well as the actual visuals themselves. As a matter of fact, Mandragora's artistic approach to presentation is among the best I have ever seen in the genre. The graphics are phenomenal and do an amazing job of breathing life into the dark fantasy setting of Faelduum, with the ridiculous attention to detail present here making every single image worthy of being framed in an art museum. Speaking about setting, the land of Faelduum is a magnificently vast and wondrous place comprised of a significant number of biomes you will get to explore, each one not only different from the other in terms of theme, but also organically interconnected together in ways that feel seamless. Whether you're exploring the mountainous forests at the outskirts of the town of Wickham, the treacherous sewers beneath it, or just resting at your base camp among allies, every area exudes its own unique ambience that fully separates it from the rest. Here I do need to make special mention to the game's soundtrack, which further enhanced the experience as I traveled across the world, with Mandragora featuring some of the most epic melodies I have ever had the pleasure of listening to, all of which were composed by Christos Adoniou, the lead guitarist of Septic Flesh. Whether it was the hauntingly symbolic track in the game's main menu or the laid-back melody at your base camp, among others, this is one of the rare occasions where a game's music gave me goosebumps, which I consider high praise considering how picky I can be in that regard. Now, Faelduum is not only an interesting realm to traverse, but also explore, with the world being truly packed to the brim with a litany of secrets and collectibles to uncover, adding further depth to an already engaging experience and making the process of venturing off the beaten path a rewarding one. On a basic level, collectibles are divided into equipment pieces, consumables, quest items, essence, entropic energy, diagrams, crafting material, and gold. Equipment pieces refer to a variety of armor, weapons, and rings that you can equip in order to tailor your approach to combat according to your desires. Armor can range from the tanky full plates to the more versatile leather attire, all the way to cloth outfits, all of which dictate your speed and range of motion according to weight. Weapons include classics like the single and two-handed swords, dual daggers, maces, warhammers, as well as a collection of arcane artifacts which allow you to channel powerful magic through them. Rings are trinkets that provide certain benefits such as increased health and stamina, of which you can have a total of 4 equipped at any given moment. Consumables refer to one-use items you can utilize in order to gain a temporary buff, such as a brief increase in physical damage output or gradual replenishment of health. Quest items are objects of interest connected to tasks given to you by NPCs, which you return to them in exchange for rewards. I should note that Mandragora is quite quest heavy, but most of the quests were quite fun and gave interesting insights into the world, so that never really bothered me. Essence drops from enemies and is one of the game's main currencies, which you utilize in order to level up your character at the game's various save points, a process which I will expand upon in the combat section. Entropic energy is a secondary currency that you spend in order to upgrade your active skills when you are at base camp, which you gain by accessing and exploring certain rifts you come across, but more on that later. Finally, diagrams, crafting material, and gold are all connected to the game's crafting system, which borrows a lot from classic massively multiplayer online games, so let's look at this in more detail. During your playthrough, you will meet several merchants that will eventually end up at your base camp, from where you will be able to interact with them. Each merchant is responsible for a certain type of item, such as a blacksmith offering armor and weapon wares, a jeweler who can provide rings, as well as a cook from whom you can procure food consumables for a feast. fee. The services of said merchants are divided into the acquisition of crafting material and the crafting of the items themselves, and this is where the game's merchant upgrade system comes into play. You see, the aforementioned diagrams are pretty much item blueprints which you bring back to the respective merchant in order to both add new items to their crafting repertoire, but also to provide them with experience in order for them to level up and be able to craft even more powerful items. This is where the crafting materials and gold come into play, given that the majority of these items require both to be crafted, with each item you create providing additional experience points toward the upgrading of each merchant, on top of the ones gained from diagrams. The cart of each merchant can also be upgraded on occasion, which results in lowered purchasing prices and better chances for material drops related to said merchant. I'll admit that said system may come off as grindy to some players, but do let me clarify that it is by no means mandatory in order to enjoy the game, at least to my experience. More specifically, aside from a basic armor I crafted at the start of the game, which I held on to until I was 15 hours into my playthrough, the equipment I ended up with consisted of weapons, armor, and rings that were either dropped from enemies or discovered during exploration. That being said, I personally did enjoy the merchant upgrade system and did engage with it frequently, though in all honesty I only ended up using some of the basic enchantments offered by one of the NPCs in the end, with the rest of my crafting being mainly for the fun of discovery. On the topic of discovery, I have to say that I had a blast exploring Faelduum in order to unearth every possible secret I could find, which ended up being a tall order given that the game's map is quite massive. I was very much pleasantly surprised by how sprawling the setting ended up being, and how many opportunities for investigation it offered, which is also where the metroidvania element came into play. As expected from the genre, the map features a lot of ability-gated exploration and backtracking if you wish to see everything on offer here, with classic traversal skills such as the double jump and ground slam making an expected appearance, alongside some less featured capabilities like the hookshot. I also have to give props to the map overview design, which was incredibly efficient. More specifically, the game allows you to place up to 20 manual markers of varying symbols on the map, which may sound few but end up being more than enough when paired with the fact that after you find the map fragment of each biome and bring it to one of your merchants, the majority of collectibles and points of interest are automatically marked, which was a huge plus. That being said, make sure to use the manual markers from early on when it comes to ability gates and non-chest collectibles, since those don't get marked aside from places where you can use the ground slam. Also notable is the game's incredible fast travel system, which becomes available pretty much from the get-go and allows you to teleport between every activated save point in the blink of an eye. Platforming-wise, Mandragora didn't really feature a lot of acrobatic segments, given that its true allegiance lies with combat, as I will soon explain. That being said, there were a few sections that actually focused on that aspect and necessitated quick reflexes in order to avoid getting destroyed by hazards, which offered some welcome gameplay variety alongside a bit of heart palpitation given their stressful nature, which was essentially a short gauntlet. The one thing I wasn't a huge fan of in relation to the game's exploratory aspect was the realm of Entropy which you got to visit from time to time. More specifically, you eventually gain the ability to enter certain rifts you come across, which lead you into a nightmarish world that damages you over time as you explore it. There are specific upgrades you purchase gradually, which make the traversal of that place easier, but it never really grew on me since I found it kind of bland, though I didn't hate it either. Moving on to combat, this is undeniably the fundamental focus of Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree, as well as where its challenging Souls-like nature rears its intimidating head. For starters, the game offers you the possibility to choose between 6 different classes, namely the Vanguard, Flameweaver, Spellbinder, Nightshade, Wild Warden, and Vindicator, all of which vary in terms of gameplay approach. I played the whole game as a Vanguard, which is essentially the pure fighter class, thus my comments will focus on my experience dealing with enemies while in that role, though a degree of the mentality of this class is also applicable to the others, given certain universal concepts. In true Souls-like fashion, combat in Mandragora feels hefty, deliberate, and tactical, which you will immediately get an idea of based on the fact that your character's movement carries weight. Also on brand for the genre is the presence of a stamina bar, which depletes as you perform tense actions such as attacking with weapons, blocking, and dodge rolling, quickly replenishes when not straining yourself, and if it goes to 0, your movement becomes sluggish and you leave yourself open to attacks. My combat style alternated between the use of a sword and shield as well as a two-handed blade, with the former allowing me to swiftly engage, block, and retaliate, while the latter giving way to more powerful albeit slower attacks that could land from longer range, and leaving me with dodge rolling as my only means of avoiding enemy hits. Basically, basic attacks aside, you eventually begin to unlock additional active abilities, such as my beloved Bleed Slash, which you use at the cost of adrenaline, a combat currency that accumulates as you land hits on enemies. To be completely honest, I never really bothered with any of the new skills I unlocked, given that my basic attack in combination with my active skill that caused bleeding carried me through the whole game and was too fun to switch up, but there's a significant range of active abilities for you to try out, with many of them requiring specific weapon types to be utilized, such as warhammers or arcane artifacts. Active skills aside, the game features a character upgrade system in the form of leveling up by using essence at save points, with each level giving you a talent point which you can then spend on a skill tree in exchange for passive benefits, such as increasing your basic statistics as well as getting special perks like the ability to apply critical damage on your bleed effects. After a certain level threshold, you can actually multi-class and obtain skills from the trees of other classes, but I chose to completely focus on my role as a vanguard with just a bit of nightshade thrown into the mix, that is the class equivalent to a rogue and makes use of daggers and poison, which was an approach that worked out in my favor. Skill trees can be refunded if you want to try something new, though I never bothered with that since I was happy with my build. Now, I didn't get a chance to try out any of the spellcasting classes, but based on my research, they tend to be much more range oriented, can deal massive amounts of damage from afar, and as expected, utilize mana for spellcasting but lack in the defense department, so nothing out of the ordinary here. It goes without saying that as a true Souls-like, Mandragora incorporates old school corpse runs, meaning that if you perish, you drop all currency and have to get back to your corpse to reclaim it, and if you die before you get to it, all currency is forever lost. The only thing I would have wanted here is for the game to have given me some sort of incentive to switch it up a bit when it came to my combat approach, since I never really felt the need to play around with my equipment and active skills given the strength and efficiency of my build. Off the top of my head, one way that could have been done would be the incorporation of certain enemies that are weak against certain attacks and strong against others, which I feel would have added some variety into the mix. All in all, combat is incredibly satisfying and rewards enemy observation, patience, and exploiting openings, and no battles exemplify that more than the brutal bosses the game will throw your way. I'm delighted to say that the big bads I clashed against during my travels across Faelduum were among the most fun, challenging, and at the same time balanced skirmishes I have experienced in the genre. A quality Souls-like always makes sure that if you happen to die during a boss fight, you're able to tell that 1. It was due to your own miscalculations, and 2. You can actually identify what went wrong and try to rectify that. And that was exactly how I always felt when one of the villains here prevailed over me. I can safely say that there wasn't a single time after losing to a boss here that felt unfair to me, with each defeat giving me more knowledge so as to increase my chances of survival in my next attempt. That being said, I wouldn't place the bosses of Mandragora on the extremely challenging side of things. That's not to say that there aren't many of them that will make short work of you if you're not careful, but as you grow stronger, many of them become much more manageable than initially expected, though never to an extent where they cannot completely decimate the less wary, including a final confrontation that is bound to test the limits of your patience and perseverance. My one complaint here is that some bosses required a bit of a trek back to them if you died, since the save point was farther than expected, which did lead to a degree of tedium given that I died several times to some of them. On to difficulty, if we're talking about the game's default mode, which was the one I experienced, I'd situate Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree on the quite challenging side of things. A quality earned due to its, for the most part, harder than average boss battles, but also a good number of its basic enemies, many of whom require keen observation and snappy reflexes for you not to be taken down, especially when they come at you in groups of 2 or 3 at a time. That being said, there are certain accessibility options on offer here, such as enemy damage and health sliders, which will allow you to tailor the challenge to your own tastes so that you won't have to suffer like I did, so do keep that in mind. As for length, it took me 27 hours to complete Mandragora with 99% completion rate and 55 out of 58 quests completed, with what I assume to be an additional couple of hours for 100% depending on player skill and observation levels. For a price of about $40, Mandragora is completely worth the price of admission based on its overall stellar quality and fun factor. Now, before we get to the verdict, there are a few things I wish to mention here in order to better clarify if this game is up your alley, as well as some spoiler-free tips to make your experience more efficient. First, while Mandragora is a true Soulsvania, do keep in mind that its heart really lies with its Souls-like side. From its heavy use of stamina to its slow, hefty, and deliberate movement and combat system, all the way to how punishing the game's enemies, bosses, bosses, environments, and death system can be, you need to be prepared to perish a lot if you end up playing this in its default difficulty setting. I definitely enjoyed this as a metroidvania as well, but if Souls-likes are not your thing, I'd recommend giving the demo a shot before deliberating on a purchase. Second, I've noticed some complaints about the extensive need for lockpicks when it comes to the game's exploration. More specifically, many of the collectibles you will obtain during your playthrough are contained within chests, the majority of which are locked and require a lockpick to open. The aforementioned complaints are aimed toward what some players consider to be a lack of lockpick reserves, which was not my experience. More specifically, while you will find several lockpicks as you traverse the world, what I would like to draw your attention to is a certain merchant that you find in the early hours of the game, who then sets up camp at your base. Said merchant sells lockpicks in stacks of 6, and occasionally restocks, so do pay him a visit every time you find yourself there. For reference, it was only once that I ran out of lockpicks during my playthrough, and that was because I hadn't yet realized I already had a merchant selling them. Finally, another set of complaints has been aimed at the game's crafting system as being too grindy, which I feel is a valid argument. That being said, I do wish to reiterate that said crafting system is by no means mandatory, as I mentioned during my explanation of said system previously, but also wish to point out that the upgrading of merchants is not as hard as you may think at first, given that if you just go about exploring regularly, you will often have lots of crafting materials and gold stocked up. And don't forget that merchants also sell a good number of said materials, so you can always buy it from them since gold will never really be an issue. As an added tip here, most materials present in your menu actually include notes in terms of the biome where they're present, as well as enemies that may drop them, which was a nice touch. Still, there's no sugarcoating that if you wish to max out the merchant levels, which I didn't do, you will have to grind for it to a certain extent. In conclusion, my time with Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree was fantastic. I loved its world building and narrative despite its predictability, I adored its slow-paced, deliberate combat, I had a blast exploring Faelduum, I found the bosses to be incredibly balanced in a challenging way, and was hit with some nice nostalgia waves from the game's MMO-inspired crafting system as well as certain aspects of its visual presentation and lore. I do wish I had been given more incentive to switch it up when it came to my equipment, for example by having certain enemies being susceptible to specific types of attacks and immune to others. The Entropy Rifts weren't exactly my cup of tea, and some save points were inconveniently far from their respective bosses, but these are just nitpicks that couldn't mar an otherwise amazing game. Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree is a visual and auditory delight, as well as a fantastic Soulsvania experience and a title fully deserving of a prominent position in your game library. My final verdict on Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree is 9.1 out of 10. What are your thoughts on Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree? Have you played it yet? Do you agree with the points I mentioned, or do you see things differently? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out!